Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Married Your Therapist. My name is Price, and I actually married your therapist.
Hi, I'm Ashlyn. I'm a licensed therapist. Please keep in mind that even though we're talking about mental health, this podcast isn't the same thing as therapy.
And I think that's awesome because therapy is very highly specialized to the individual that you're counseling, right, who's in the room with you, but here we get to explore topics, not people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, we can take a deep dive into topics that just aren't appropriate to spend a whole session on, but it's still important information and helpful for people to have.
Right. And I think that's kind of the joy of getting to record this podcast with you, is getting to really take these things all the way through, like a logical thought process and an explanation.
As somebody who's married to your therapist, I think that you can confirm that this is what we spend all day talking about in our house. It's a very real picture into the things that we're actually
This podcast got
about.
started, I was like, damn it, I'm recording this.
Yeah, so it's very authentic.
Well, with that in mind, today's topic, I want to talk to you about another neurodivergence, ADHD.
Yeah.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
Yes.
And this topic is very near and dear to my brain, simply because I have an ADHD brain.
Right.
A disordered brain.
Yeah.
In the attention deficit hyperactivity variety. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that word disordered in there.
Well, I hope today that we're dispelling some of the disorder around ADHD brains. I think that a lot of what happens with any sort of neurodivergence is that our brain actually functions incredibly well, but our environment, the way that, the world works now, isn't really well suited to those brains. So certainly it is, a form of disability in the way that our world is, in the way that we're expected to function kind of neurotypically. But I think that they're actually really incredible brains, and you can befriend your ADHD brain.
And I'm excited to share about how I've even utilized some aspects of having ADHD to my advantage in my job, right? In my field, and have had a good career considering the way that I'm able to kind of leverage, my disordered brain.
Exactly. I think you've definitely been able to leverage your skills and to use those to your advantage, and to find ways of working that really suit your brain. Yeah,
because we call it a disorder, but it's really just about how you're able to interact with yourself. And that's true for all people. How are you able to take who you are and maximize that, in your life.
Yeah, not mask, but maximize for sure.
Yeah, maximize. Yeah, definitely. And we talked about this with the our autism podcast as well.
Right. Yeah, that it's a brain, again, that's not suited to the world that we live in, but it's certainly an important way of being, a worthwhile way of being, and you don't have to mask those things to be able to live a happy and fulfilling life.
Totally. So, but before we dive into all of that, let's kind of set up a baseline here of what is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about kind of how it appears basically in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that therapists and counselors and psychiatrists use. I tend to veer away from using that as the primary way to explain things.
We have a rogue therapist on our hands here. She's a rebel.
We can talk about some of the symptoms that you'll be familiar with hearing about. So ADHD brains can deal with impulsivity, with disorganization and problems with prioritizing certain tasks, poor time management skills that often comes down to time blindness. Really, ADHD is a difference in focus. So we've heard about it being a disordered sort of focus, an inability to focus, but that's not true at all. ADHD brains can be incredibly good at focusing, or really good at kind of moving back and forth between different tasks in a way that I think some other brains can't do quite as well. But you'll hear about it as, poor time management. The next one is problems focusing on a task. So again, coming back to that focus, but really it's just a difference in the way the brain focuses. restlessness, excessive activity, poor planning, doing multiple things at once, a low frustration tolerance, mood swings.
What'd you just say to me? What the hell did you just say to me? I'm kidding. Sorry.
Having kind of impulsive moods or having a hot temper.
You don't even know what you're talking about right now. How dare you? I'm sorry.
Impulsivity, trouble coping with stress, or seeking stimulation in their environment and in their experiences. And that has to do with the difficulty with ADHD brains of regulating dopamine, which is a reward chemical in your brain. So when you make a checklist and you check something off, that gives you a little shot of dopamine. That's a very autistic way of describing dopamine. Anyway, mostly it's the reward center of your brain telling you, like, yes, this was a fulfilling thing for me to do.
Right now, the specific action in this moment is fantastic. Great job.
Yes.
Not a long-term sort of dopamine receiver, right? That's not really how dopamine works. It's not like, oh, you got a great night's sleep last night. Yeah, no, it's like, oh, I got a snack. Oh, candy. Awesome.
It's really a good motivator. Yep, it keeps you moving to the next task and keeps you doing the task that you're doing. And one of the ways that we talk about kind of managing dopamine is breaking tasks up into smaller parts. So instead of going, I have to do this task and it's going to take me 4 hours, and at the end of it, I'm going to get one shot of dopamine, not worthwhile. How can I break this up so that every, 20 or so minutes, I feel like I'm completing part of this and feeling good and able to move on or take a break or do what I need to do. Well,
I've been doing a lot of writing lately, and a great reward system is like every 500 words, I have a cracker.
Food is a great reward as well.
Yeah, and before long, you're like, oh man, I gotta get to that, that cracker, or whatever the little snack is.
Yeah, it's exactly that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And I definitely remember when I was in high school doing some yard work with a buddy, and he had a to-do list from his parents of the yard work that he had to do, and he said, okay, well, we did this thing, and we did this thing. He's crossing off stuff from the list, and he goes, oh my gosh, I almost forgot. I did this earlier. And he crossed off the list, and he looked at me, and he smiled, and he said, you wouldn't want to miss out on those psychological benefits, would you? Because he knew that the joy was in physically crossing the item off the list. Not just knowing that it was done, but actually crossing it off brought benefit, right?
Yeah, there's fulfillment in that. It feels good.
So that's kind of what you're talking about when you say dopamine.
Exactly.
Cool.
So that's kind of the way that the DSM-5 categorizes it. Again, I really veer away from the way that it talks about it being disordered. Yes, it can certainly be an inhibitor in trying to navigate a neurotypical world. And if you view it as a disability, which many people with ADHD do, that's perfectly valid. It certainly can be a disability. We've talked a lot about it being protected by the American Disabilities Act and how that can play into a workplace environment and that sort of thing. So it's certainly valid as a disability, but I think that when you have to live with something, where can we see the strengths in it? Where can we really see, the way that you shine through and all of that and what you bring to the world? So that's the way that I like to conceptualize it.
You've talked a lot about it to me is kind of the way that your brain filters information.
Yes.
And being very different. Or that really being the difference, right? Is how our brain filters the world around us.
So, if I'm talking to somebody who's ADHD or talking to somebody who loves somebody who's ADHD, here's the way that I tend to break that down for a client. One of our brain's primary jobs is filtering out the world. My autistic brain does not filter out the world very well at all, and it can be very overwhelming. But all of our brains are filtering out the world, and an ADHD brain has an incredibly powerful filter. It is really great at performing that function. So an ADHD brain filters out everything that is not novel or new, interesting, challenging, or urgent. So if you think of it as a filter, and things are trying to get through, if it doesn't meet one of those criteria, it's not passing through. And so that can be why people with ADHD have a hard time focusing or a hard time completing tasks. They might really struggle with procrastination until it's the very last minute, and now urgency's there or the challenge is there, and they're able to get through something.
Hours and days and weeks that I have spent pushing out a task until the moment that I have to get it done.
And then you get it done, and you get it done beautifully, but yeah, you've spent
without
all that
knowing
time.
that it's literally like my brain doesn't even want to get that done until it has to be done, because that's how the filter in my brain works.
Exactly. That incredibly powerful filter is filtering that out. And the other thing, you know, in dealing with something like that is getting to harness that. So if, let's say, you're trying to complete something with a deadline, don't shame yourself for the time that you're not able to do that. If you know that you're going to be able to get it done, you know, the day before, and that's enough time to complete that task, let yourself enjoy the other time when you're not getting it done.
The amount of stress that we put ourselves under because we're not getting it done, and we're wondering why.
Like this, right?
Yeah, I should be doing this an hour every day until the assignment is due, but no, what I'm going to do is for the 3 hours leading up to the due, like when the assignment is due, I'm going to cram it in, and I'm going to get it done, and I get it done every time. But to all of the students out there who are just kicking themselves over, why can't I?
Right.
They spend all that time stressing and anxious, and they come to a therapist saying, this is a huge problem for me. And what's your response to a student who says that, you know?
Well, on one hand, if you're a student, I do think that it can be helpful to build a routine. Do something that gets you outside of your normal space. So now we're talking about something that's novel and interesting, and to do little bits at a time and focus on getting in an area where you don't have outside distractions. That's definitely a very valid way to do that and can be really helpful for a lot of ADHD brains. But sometimes I encounter students who actually know that they can get it done the day before. I had a student who was just brilliant, was in grad school, and would spend all week working up to assignments that were due, I think, at the end of the week. And he just talked about how much shame he felt that he wasn't able to get it done, that he'd like to be doing these other things, but he doesn't do them because he knows he should be working on his schoolwork.
Right.
And then but he gets to the last day and he got it done every single time. It's like, let's talk about this. You've made it all the way to grad school. Things are going really well. What if you didn't force yourself to feel... What if you didn't sit in that shame anymore? What if instead you enjoyed the time with your partner? What if instead you caught up on the show that you wanted to get caught up on? What if instead you did other things that you've been putting off because you feel like you need to sit with that shame, and then you just did it the last day? And he's like, I can do that? And
that's allowed?
Right. And then we came back, 2 weeks later or whatever, and he's like, yeah, I just let myself enjoy my life and live my life. Yeah. And then I came back and I got it done, and I knew that I could do that.
I have personally found so much relief and satisfaction in simply that, not changing the way that I behave, but learning that I behave differently. Yeah. And that's fine. Because for so long you think, oh, the way I need to prepare for this test should look like this, because this is what all the study guides say, this is what my teachers say, this is what our culture tells me is normal, but it's not how I function. And so giving yourself permission to enjoy your life, even though you live your life differently, is huge. And I think that's so true for anybody who's neurodivergent, with any variety of neurodivergence.
Embrace your brain in the way that it works. And just because a neurotypical classroom and a neurotypical teacher are telling you you have to get it done this way, and that doesn't work for you, so why not allow yourself to enjoy that time and allow yourself to enjoy doing things differently when you're still accomplishing what you need to do.
Right.
You'll also find that ADHD people are just attracted to things that fit those criteria, that things that are new, things that are interesting. I think ADHD people really embrace like learning new things and taking on a challenge in a way that I think is just incredible. It's such a beautiful part of that.
What do you mean by that?
Well, since that filter is engaged, since the world is being filtered that way, I think that ADHD people tend to seek out experiences that fit that. And so they're more likely to take a chance. ADHD people are more likely to start their own business. They're more likely to take on something that's a challenge that other people might be scared to even set out to do.
I think they're much more likely to start their own business, right?
Yeah,
like the vast majority of business owners are
I
ADHD.
forget, but it's an incredibly high percentage of, of business owners.
Shouts out. How's it going, boys?
How
How y'all doing?
Yeah, that they're ADHD, that they're looking for that challenge, looking for something to take on.
Yeah, they're looking for something new. A 9 to 5 doing the same thing for 30 years sounds like a nightmare, right? I want new and excitement. And I think a lot of people, I saw a lot of people in the restaurant industry who I would say probably were more ADHD because of the type of... especially like the front of house staff, waiting tables and stuff. Yeah,
there's always something new happening, always some problem to solve.
Yeah, there's a lot going on at one time, and I think ADHD people can really thrive in that sort of environment.
Yeah, meeting new people all the time.
Not that normies can't.
Sure.
But yeah, the idea of like meeting new people and taking... I know I really thrived in a restaurant environment. I really enjoyed that work, but it was exhausting. But I really got a lot of satisfaction out of that.
Yeah.
And then I think people in like sales roles or customer facing roles where you're being challenged with like new situations or new problems that are coming up, fires that you have to put out, that sort of thing. But like a job that like data entry where you were just doing the same thing over and over again.
I love that. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, God bless you. That sounds like a nightmare to me.
Something that I don't want to go any further without acknowledging is that quite a few brains, the statistics really range. It's something like 20 to 80%, but there can be a lot of overlap between people who are autistic and also have ADHD, and the way that those symptoms show up, because we're almost talking about it as though it's two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right.
And honestly, a lot of our lived experiences do feel like two ends of a spectrum.
Yeah, you're my autist and I'm your ADHDer, and we're like waiting both ends of the
we really
plank.
Balance each other out in those ways. But quite a few people in our lives, a lot of clients that I see do have an overlap. Will have both ADHD and will be autistic. And the way that both of those show up is really nuanced. And a lot of times it can feel like their brain is kind of arguing against itself, because they might prefer, the stability of a routine, but their brain is also seeking out these new experiences. And so that can create its own set of struggles and its own set of like unique gifts that they bring to the world, having both of those.
I think that some of our favorite entertainers are autistic and ADHD because they are super interested in like specific things, which is kind of an autistic trait, like a deep dive interest in a specific topic. Yes. But then ADHD means that they are seeking out fun and excitement and staying engaged with an audience. And
excited of the challenge of getting up in front of other people.
Yeah. So I think that it sounds really difficult to deal with both of those things simultaneously, but I think that there are people who navigate it really beautifully well, and do a great job of that. That I see people I know personally, people that I like watch on YouTube,
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I just want to acknowledge that we're talking about these two things as though they're opposite. Quite a few folks actually have an overlap of the two. And if you're relating to both of these, that might be something that applies to you as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out, because for so long I told people when I was talking to people about like my opinions on neurodivergence, I definitely related like that autism and ADHD were opposite ends of the same spectrum, and that couldn't be more wrong, because you have people who have both.
Right, we're just really dealing with two it's not dealing with the same parts of the brain, that it's dealing with two different things. And so you certainly can have that overlap.
So what part of the brain is ADHD talking about? It's really that threshold, right?
Yeah, it's really, Well, a couple of things. It's really talking about that filter. Another way that I describe it to clients is having a threshold. And so if we have, a horizontal line that is our ideal level of stimulation, and maybe that changes day to day depending on if we're tired and well nourished and all of those things. But if you have an ideal level of stimulation, people with ADHD tend to sit below that line. Their brain's just natural state sits below that line. Absolutely nothing to do with intelligence, absolutely nothing to do with, your capability, but that stimulation internally doesn't meet your ideal level of what you need to be able to focus and to be engaged.
In this context, could you give us a definition or some examples of stimulation?
Yeah. So stimulation, well, I'm talking about external stimulation as the thing that's missing here. So external stimulation can be like different physical sensations, different sounds, different auditory or visual stimulation. So it's the input that's coming toward you that you're engaging in the world.
Fidget spinners.
Yeah. And so that's a great point. Fidget spinners, a lot of, teachers were upset with that. They were like, this is a distraction in the classroom and that sort of thing. But literally what's happening is that an ADHD person has this ideal level of stimulation that allows them to focus, and their brain internally is riding below that line. And so adding in something to spin, something to fidget with, is boosting that stimulation just enough so that they're able to focus and concentrate. And it's actually a huge benefit to them to be able to have that. So it's why, another thing in the neurotypical world is like, you shouldn't be listening to music while you're doing a task, or you shouldn't be. Right. And no, usually an ADHD brain needs that extra level of stimulation to be able to focus.
A woman I worked with, I want to talk about somebody I worked with, because so far all of our discussions have mostly been in the educational space, because so many people run into issues with ADHD in the classroom because they have a hard time focusing, and that's where you get diagnosed and maybe even medicated at an early age, is because of a teacher saying, hey, this person is not paying attention. Sure. But I worked with somebody for several months in an office setting. She was a customer service rep, and she entered orders that were emailed to her. She entered them into the system. Mm-hmm. It was quite a complicated job, but it was a pretty straightforward and kind of boring job.
Yeah, a lot of repetition.
Yeah. So she had her phone up, and she would watch television shows on her through a headset. Mm-hmm. And she would enter orders, and she was happy as a clam. Yeah. And then the company came out with a new policy saying that you couldn't use your phone at your desk because they thought we were children and needed to be babysat.
Right.
And she quit. She couldn't do it. She could not sit there in silence entering orders all day. And I get it, because I was a salesperson, so I was making a lot of phone calls and staying busy, so my brain was getting the interaction that it needed. Stimulation. Yeah. Now, of course, she didn't ever admit that she had ADHD, but to me, that's a pretty clear sign that
it was just interesting to watch that she had been able to do this task, this like repetitious task, but had these videos playing to keep that level of stimulation.
And she was good at her job. Yeah. And somebody said, no, you're not good at your job. If you're like, imagine how many more orders she could be putting in if she wasn't distracted by TV. Like, not everybody's brains work like that, my guy. Yeah. Some of us need to have some music playing in order to be able to focus,
Yep. I remember a woman at my office who had a very similar thing. She was doing these really complex, she was an estimator working on these large projects and doing all this intensive stuff. But I think that there was a lot of repetition too, because she's, identifying the cost of each component of this project. And she would have Netflix playing, and people were always like, she always has Netflix up, we hate that she does this, but she was getting her work done, and she was incredible at what she did. And it was that like blindness to like, no, this is actually working. It actually is working for her to have.
It reminds me of what one of my closest friends, Ken, told me. He's now the senior director of IT at a large company. Like, he's very successful, and he told me I don't measure the inputs. I measure the output. I don't care how you get the work done. I just care that it is done. Yeah. And that it's done successfully. It's done well. And beyond that, he doesn't have any questions. He doesn't care if you're at home in your PJs doing it. He just wants it done. He doesn't care if you're watching Netflix, you know.
It's such, well, I was going to say it's such a, like, it's so affirming of neurodivergence, and it certainly is, but it's just so affirming of us as, like, humans.
Yeah.
That everybody has their own special needs and their own special, requirements to be able to get through whatever task that they're doing. And, like, why not let people be in the environment that suits them best? And don't people tend to know the things that suit them best as an individual? Like, let them be the expert in that.
Right. Are we really better as a company with leadership assuming that the way their brains work is exactly the same as everybody else's brain? Right. You know, does that make you a stronger company?
Yeah.
Or a stronger educational system, a stronger school or college, you know? Now, to be fair, I have worked in environments where people wanted to blast loud music in a setting that was not acceptable, was just truly distracting to other employees. And, that's not what I'm advocating for.
And that's specifically tough because that is, once again, assuming that everybody's brain works the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that a policy that says you can't wear headphones at work is maybe really problematic when you have some people who are going to work better with music playing. But it's also problematic to say, let's blast music all day. This team... I'm thinking about a specific job where the sort of job that I did was very autism friendly. It was had a lot of repetition. It was the same thing over and over as entering data in a spreadsheet. Loved it. One of my favorite things I've ever done, apart from being a counselor. It was so good. And the team who worked next to us, a very ADHD sort of friendly team. They're making calls all day. It's very fast paced. Right. They're always playing a game. They're making it a challenge. And they would blast music, and I had to wear headphones just to cut out the noise. I wasn't listening to anything. I just couldn't focus and listen to music.
You take your earplugs to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at a recruitment firm, and those folks are notorious for that, like, toxic positivity. Like, let's get them, team. These are the same people who, when a hurricane came through town, they made you bring a sleeping bag instead of letting you off work in case you got flooded into your office. And I'll never forgive them for that.
Yeah, that was one specific manager, but there were a lot of problematic things in this.
That was not ADHD or autism friendly.
It was not human friendly. Did not enjoy.
Right. So something that I love about talking about neurodiversity with you is how biologically adaptive this stuff is. We talked about how autism is very friendly within, like, a biological context of, like, how humans have evolved. And it may not be as, like, conducive to modern life, but I think ADHD is the same way. Like, my high filter actually would work very well in kind of a human tribal sort of mindset, like 100 people hunting and gathering food, the way most humans existed throughout most of human history. Having a few ADHD folks in the mix there would actually be really helpful, right? Could you talk to us about that?
Having to live in smaller communities, we're growing food, or we're hunting and gathering and doing those sorts of things. That's been most of the way that our brains have developed. And, brains only change so much each generation, that changes in the brain happen very, very slowly. So the way that our world exists now is not a good way of understanding how our brains work and the ideal environment for them to be in. So an ADHD brain, when they studied ADHD as it exists in, like, hunter-gatherer communities, people who would meet the requirements for that, who live in communities who do that, they were actually better nourished than their peers because they were more likely to have that, to be able to take on the challenge, to have the motivation and the energy to go out and to find food and to find resources, and they were better nourished than their peers.
What's up, ADHDers? We out here. We out here hunting and gathering.
Yeah, but it's like, if we really want to understand our brains, we need to think about the way that humans have mostly lived throughout most of human existence, and that was the majority of it. And so, yeah, they're incredibly adaptive. They're very well suited to that sort of environment. You just stick them in an office, and suddenly there's none of that.
They crumble like a fucking crouton.
Sure.
No, I'm sorry.
There's none of that same sort of challenge or urgency. It's the same thing day in and day out. I think of one of the favorite ADHDers in our life, and she's like, I just can't, like, the paycheck isn't motivating enough for me to be able to work every day. Like, I'm showing up to my job and just knowing that in 2 weeks I'm going to get a paycheck isn't keeping me engaged day to day. And yeah, I think that a lot of people find that really long-term motivator that isn't very tangible.
Yeah.
You know, it's certainly tangible if they're like turning your lights off, but that's not the way our brains are meant to function.
Now, if
that's not the world we're supposed to live in.
But a great motivator is, I am hungry.
Sure.
I need to eat.
But that's a very in the moment sort of motivator, which is why it makes perfect sense in like a hunter-gatherer community. I'm hungry. I need to eat. Let's go hunt right now.
Right.
As opposed to, man, in the future, I'm going to be hungry and I'm going to need to be able to buy food. And to buy food, I need to create this task. But I'm not feeling any of those things. It's not getting past that filter for me in the moment. So it can be hard to stick with stuff.
Yeah, totally. What are some other ways that like ADHD lends itself to be biologically adaptive to a world that has passed us by?
Well, that's one way. That's really talking about the past. But there are a lot of ways that an ADHD brain is adaptive. So one is that ability to hyperfocus, that the focusing part of ADHD, it's not an inability to focus. It's just a difference in focus. And so one of those differences in focus is an ability to hyper-focus. A lot of times that's accompanied by like time blindness, not being aware about how much time has passed. It's something I hear as a complaint a lot in like people who are in relationships with ADHDers is, you know, he said he was going to be gone for 15 minutes and then he was gone for 3 hours playing video games or whatever.
Right.
It was rude or it felt insensitive to me. And it's like, that person had no idea time had passed.
How many times have I been like, Mom, I just need 5 more minutes before I go to bed. And then like within 2 seconds, she's back. She's like, it's been 5 minutes. I'm like, there's no way it's been 5 minutes. What are you talking about?
That the brain is just able to cut that out. And what a benefit if you're needing to focus on a task that you seem to have as somebody with ADHD, this like boundless energy for different tasks that you need to complete. And it's accompanied by that time blindness of not recognizing the passage of time. And
today's a great example. I'm locked in on building out a web page for your practice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm brand new at designing web pages.
Yep.
So I'm pulling up a lot of how-to YouTube videos and stuff. Yep. And I am like in the sauce right now on this. And as soon as we get done with this podcast, I'm going to jump right back to it because I really want to get this done because it's new and it's difficult.
It's challenging. It's challenging. It's interesting.
It is kind of urgent too, as I'm learning about like SEO optimization for businesses. This page is going to be really helpful.
And you're going to get in knowing your ADHD. You're going to get in, you're going to master this thing, and then you're going to move on to the next thing and not be focused on this for a bit. You'll be hyper-focused on something else. A lot of times you see people with ADHD get really invested in like a particular hobby and then never come back to that hobby and move on to something else.
Yep.
But it's because it's lost the challenge. Now you know how to do it. It's not urgent.
It's like when I bought your engagement ring.
Yes.
I was the expert on all things diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
I knew everything about diamonds and all about the different types of rings that were out there and what was a good deal because boy didn't have a lot of money. And now, 7 years later, a carrot is a vegetable, my guy.
Right.
I don't remember any of that.
Yeah.
Because it left my filter. It's no longer relevant to me, so I don't hold on to that information anymore. And
yeah.
I think that's pretty typical of ADHD people, right?
Sure, of being able to get really, really invested in something and then move on and master something new.
Yeah.
Another thing that is adaptive about people who are ADHD is that they have a lot of resilience. One is because traumatized folks have to have a lot of resilience, and a lot of people with ADHD have been told that they're stupid, have been told that they're not capable, and so you have to build up a lot of resilience just to get through and get to this point that you're at now.
They're told that they're stupid, but what they're actually being told is you don't fit well in this very specific environment that we've created.
I had an idea of what success would look like here, and you're not fitting that very specific mold of writing this paper slowly, a little bit at a time, every single night.
Or sitting in this desk for hours at a time.
And not moving. And
yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. But the other thing is just that ADHD people have that ability to like really jump in and engage with something with sometimes almost with like this fearlessness. And that builds a lot of resilience when you go through a lot of different experiences and you know that you've survived them and that you know you've gotten to the other side. So that's a strength. ADHD people tend to be pretty creative, especially in ways that are, you know, again, new, interesting, challenging. They tend to have really well-developed conversational skills. ADHD people can sometimes struggle with feeling like they put their foot in their mouth all the time, but anybody who's willing to get out there and try again and test something out and make a mistake and come back is going to have much better social conversational skills than somebody who's not really able to get out there in the first place.
Right.
So that can be a huge advantage. They can be great conversationalists or speakers and that sort of thing. They're spontaneous. That's something that partners almost always tend to describe loving about their ADHD partners. They have an abundance of energy. Again, that ability to like hyper-focus and really dive into a task. And an ability to multitask. So I had a teacher who taught us that like multitasking is not a thing that the brain does. And he's a teacher that I really respect. And I think that in a sense, monofocus is important for certain things, but again, that level of stimulation, you can do multiple things at once. I see you be successful doing multiple things at once.
I think it depends on the type of stimulation. Like, I can't go from writing here to writing there and back and forth because I have to stop and start my train of thought. But you will never catch me writing without also listening to a TV show. Mm-hmm. And I'm not
cannot
really
imagine, but yes.
I'm not really paying super close attention to the TV show.
Yeah.
But it's really the only way that I can focus on and I'm just doing a lot of writing right now, so that's why this is very prevalent or very much on my mind. But if I and somebody could say that, hey, if you were really just focused on the writing, you would be more effective or efficient. Maybe if I knew what every word that I was going to say, I'd be faster at typing it. Mm-hmm. But what helps me is being able to like have my brain breathe a little bit.
It helps you plug in long term to a project when you're able to do that. You really have so much ability to just continue and push through.
It's almost like the minute I focus on a specific thing and there's nothing else going on, I have this internal timer that is ticking. And the minute we burn that down and it's minutes, I'm out. I am done. I'm not interested in the task anymore. So, you know, one of the things that clued me into, hey, you might have ADHD early on in my life was any sort of driving. If I was driving somewhere.
Yeah, you get very bored driving.
Which
I find highly unrelatable to me.
I can't just drive somewhere. Some people talk about my car is my sanctuary. You know, I just get in the car and have a quiet drive home. What are you talking about? It's podcast, it's radio, it's calling a family member. There is no version of me driving a car and I'm just driving.
And it's honestly beneficial to you that you are a better driver when you have something else going on. Does that mean that you should like text and drive? Does that mean that you should do something that's fully engaging your brain? No, but when you have something that's increasing that level of stimulation for you, like having music, like having a conversation with somebody, you're able to just focus on the task and get it done.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's important. So multitasking, I think, is something that ADHDers can be really skilled in, but it's a certain type of multitasking. So you don't want to be doing the same exact task at the same time. But a lot of ADHDers will enjoy like watching a favorite TV show, something that they know well, something that's not taking up all of their mental capacity, so that they can also focus on something and plug in for the long haul.
And speaking personally, sitting and watching a film, much better with popcorn. Because I like having something to do, you know, much better with a cat in my lap to pet.
Right. Something else going on.
Yeah, if I'm just sitting there, I'm kind of dying slowly, or I feel like I'm dying a slow, painful death, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that all of that is coming back to just that ADHD brains are so good at a lot of things, but it doesn't fit this neurotypical mold. And so part of like coming to terms with and embracing an ADHD brain is getting to figure out like how well it works. The things that you do are just incredible and not something that I think a neurotypical brain or a brain without ADHD could do to the degree that you
And my heart kind of breaks for myself and for everyone else out there who was told that they were bad at their job or they were bad at school or they were stupid.
I don't know that I've had a single ADHD client who wasn't consistently told throughout their life that they were stupid or that they were bad at things or that they weren't trying hard enough, they weren't motivated, they didn't care.
Yeah. No, like I really struggled with math my entire life. Turns out, I don't struggle with math at all. I totally get math. Math makes sense. But you gotta give me a reason why we're doing it. I need to know who came up with the formula. I need to know under what circumstances was that specific formula developed. I need to know what the practical application is. But a lot of people who are really good at math seem to be also really good at separating like the practical application of it and just doing the math. And that doesn't work for me. When I have it in the context of like it's interesting, it's novel, it's challenging, I'm really fucking good at math.
Yeah.
But I have to have all of those prerequisites that you don't normally get in a classroom setting, right? So there are so many people out there who claim that I just can't do math. I'm so bad at math.
And they're probably told that again and again.
Right, but you put that person in a STEM job and they're now like a biochemist and they're working on a specific problem and they're chipping away at it, and they're listening to a podcast while they're doing it.
Right.
You can have a really exceptional contributor there who's been told their entire life that they can't do that. Yeah. Which really sucks because you have all of these incredibly qualified people out there who are never able to live up to their full potential because they're buying into the narrative that they're fed, that they're stupid just because their brain has a really impressive filter on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
That their brain is really, really good at doing certain things and they're not able to be in an environment that supports that.
Yeah. No, I do some mathematic formulas in my work now, not to an extensive extent or whatever, but if you listen to what I have been told about my performance in math throughout school and then saw what I was doing now, you'd be blown away because, the young Price was told he cannot do it, and then here I am doing it, but it's because I need it. I'm looking for specific information, I'm querying a database, like, I understand how to do it.
You've got the why behind it.
Exactly, you need the why.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk about, as we're kind of wrapping up, some other things that have been helpful to you. I think one thing in dealing with that time blindness has been having a timer that sits on your desk.
It's a visual timer. So it's actually, you rotate it, and as you rotate the dial, this red panel comes up and hits, 15, 20, 25 minutes or whatever. So
you spin it around to set the time, and as you pull it to the time, there's this red line that goes around it.
Yeah, so I can glance down visually and check and see how much time is left very quickly. That's really great for me if I'm, I like to play video games to unwind. I will crank that thing to an hour and let it ride. Even if I'm not done at an hour, it's like, okay, it's been an hour.
An hour has passed.
An hour has passed.
I was going to say, you use it in a couple of different ways. One is to go, I say, hey, we're going to do this thing in 15 minutes, and you just set the timer for 15 minutes, and you know when the time is up, so you're not disappearing into that task forever and ever.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is just to acknowledge the passage of time when you want to know how long have you been playing video games.
Because I do struggle with time blindness when I am doing something I'm engaged with, right? So if I'm engaged in a task, time kind of goes out the window. I don't really pay attention to how much time is passing, and having a little beep go off every hour keeps me very grounded.
Yep, absolutely.
It was like a $6 timer, and it has been a phenomenal addition to my life.
Yeah. It has been a game changer.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the trick, specifically with ADHD, is you find very tangible ways to deal with these things. Something you said earlier is that ADHD people tend to be disorganized and messy. Well, that's true. I accept that. a lot of what ADHD people need are baskets, literal baskets.
Yep. Collection spots.
So on my desk, I have a basket, and at the end of the day, everything that's on my desk goes in the basket. And guess what? I know where everything is on my desk. It doesn't get strewn throughout the house.
Yep.
I know where everything lives on my desk. You got to dig through a basket every time you want to find it, but at least I know where it is,
And it's not a character flaw. The like being messy, being disorganized, it's something that I hear, especially again from like partners of people with ADHD, where like they leave stuff all over the house. It's like they don't care or whatever. And the thing is that it is not urgent. It's not new. It's not interesting. It's not challenging. Those same ADHD people will pick that stuff up and wash it when it's time to wash it. But they're going to leave their clothes out in the meantime because there's nothing that engages that filter about that task. They're just not needed now, and you can be blind. In fact, object permanence is something else that we talk about, where you just don't see. You might have cups or water bottles by your bed or bowls in your room, or you might have clothes on the floor or whatever. And so one thing has been having those collection spots for things. That's been helpful. Another thing is just like accepting that there's going to be some of that. And it's okay that, once a day or once a week we have to go around and gather whatever it is. And then the other thing is some like specific collection spots. One of those is like having our laundry basket in a place that actually makes sense to your brain.
Yeah.
I will walk to the other side of the house and climb up on a shelf to put something away if that's where it goes, because I like things to be in their place. But we now have our laundry basket sitting on the way to your bathroom, so that
when I get home from the gym, and I am walking to the bathroom to rinse off,
it is
and
right
I am stripping
there.
As I do
you
it.
You almost have to trip over it to get in.
And then the stuff all makes it into the laundry basket. Yeah. It's not like I have to change who I am fundamentally to make life work here. Yeah. It's just move the laundry basket into the hallway where I'm going to use
Make things make sense for your brain, make things work. I think ADHDers can be so efficient with things in a way that like I am not an efficient person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, when I was working in the manufacturing space, we talked a lot about just-in-time processes for suppliers. That means that we want, we're manufacturing, so we're taking a product and we're we're transforming it into a different product, right? Okay. So that raw material, we want it to arrive exactly when we need it, not a moment before, because it costs money to store a product, right? So the ideal is like I want it entering the building and going to the machine where we need it right when we need it. Right. That's your ideal state. That's ADHD, man, because I will wash dishes right before I use them. Yep. That's how I operate. The problem is that I now have a sink full of molding dishes.
Right. Maybe that one thing you almost never need to use, so you never wash it.
Yeah. So I'm not saying I'm more efficient that way. That's just how my brain works. And so as a partner, you're like, you're disgusting. Why do you have all these dirty dishes? But I don't do tasks that don't provide me what I need immediately.
Well, neurotypical function has been so much made like the standard, and it's just not fair. What works for your brain is good, and it's okay to have things that work for your brain. And so the laundry basket out in the hallway by the bathroom works for your brain. It allows the thing that's of value to me, which is having the clothes go in the laundry basket. It happens every time. Because it's right there. Before, we had this laundry basket that blended into the wall, had a cover over it, it scoots into the corner. Nothing ever went in there because it didn't
You mean to tell me you want me to walk over there, raise that lid, and put my clothes in it, and then close the lid? No. No way, Jose.
So one thing has been having those like collection spots. Baskets are a huge deal with ADHD. The timer. What are other things that have helped you?
Well, in my career, it's been really effective to have ADHD, especially now that I'm leaning into it, because I kind of do project management now. I run a lot of meetings, and what's a big complaint in the corporate world? This meeting could have been an email. My meetings couldn't be in emails. If I'm calling a meeting, it's because we have to talk, because I hate doing things for no reason, like putting my laundry.
You don't want to do something just to do it.
No, gross. Yep. That's disgusting. How dare you? You need to move the laundry basket in the hallway for me to use it. I'm not calling a meeting that I don't need. And those are the same thing to me.
And you've used the boredom and distraction that you get with things to keep meetings on task. Yep. So once you're actually in the meeting that needed to be scheduled, if you find yourself getting bored or distracted, that's the cue to you to go, oh, we need to move on. Yep. For whatever reason, we talk about this every single week, or we keep coming back to this, or we've talked about it for too long.
I work with is listening, but I've never had a meeting that I'm not also playing video games.
Yeah, you've increased that level of stimulation.
Yeah, so I'll be tinkering around with like a low intensity sort of game, like something that doesn't require a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. And I will, like, another friend who I won't name plays RuneScape. He's been playing, which is a very low sort of intensity video game, and he's been playing it for decades now, mm-hmm. and having an incredibly successful career. And he's got ADHD out the butt.
Yeah.
And so it's like, when they start talking, I work with very technical developers and engineers, and when they start talking, they're technicalese, they'll go down a tangent, and as soon as I'm no longer paying attention and I realize I'm just playing the game, I'm like, okay, all right, fellas, all right, ladies, we gotta curb this conversation and move on. Yep. And that's a great litmus test for, okay, this is no longer productive, like the two of you need to take that discussion elsewhere,
right?
Because we have a lot of people on this call, and so people tell me that I run the most effective meetings they've ever been to, and it's called ADHD, brought to you by ADHD.
Right.
So I've found ways to make it work for me.
Yep.
Even in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
One thing I really struggle with, and I will always struggle with, is working in an office. Mm-hmm. It is so distracting. It is so hard for me to focus when I need to focus, when there's so much going on.
Yeah, a lot of the tips that I had made a note of for this were talking about clearing your environment of extra distractions, being able to have that control of your environment, being able to sit in a new setting for different things, not the same exact space every single day because of how boring that can be. And sitting in an office is the opposite of all of those things.
So those are a lot of like practical tips, and we're going to be posting a blog post about ADHD that has a lot of links to really practical resources. Mm-hmm. There's some videos on YouTube that have changed my life, and like how to deal with ADHD from a very practical standpoint. But talk to me briefly before we adjourn. Like, what is it like? I have ADHD. I'm sitting down with you for counseling. What are you going to tell me? How are we going to deal with this? What are some consistent things you see amongst your clients that have ADHD?
Well, like we were talking about, I'm going to introduce the concept of a filter. And so now we're getting to frame everything around how can we make the things that you need to do fit into this filter. Right. That's the way that your brain works. Another thing is going to be dealing with the trauma around being told those horrible things your whole life about the way that your brain works, and learning to like embrace your brain. I think that's a huge part of counseling for me in general. Another thing is going to be talking about relationship issues. There are so many misconceptions, I think, that people have about being in a relationship with somebody with ADHD. Almost always a partner will come in and just based on the complaints that they're making, be able to go, does your partner happen to have an ADHD? Yes, oh my gosh, they are ADHD. How did you know?
Yeah.
And now...
Because they're describing symptoms. Like, the client thinks that they're describing things they take issue with.
They're thinking they're describing a character trait.
They're thinking flaw.
Exactly. Yeah. They're thinking they're describing, this person is insensitive because he won't stop the video game when he told... And I'm like, is he excited when you come in the room? Is he disappointed that he's missed the time with you, the thing you were supposed to do together? It's like, yeah, he's really excited to see me. Yeah, but yeah, he is also frustrated that we missed that thing. Yeah, he's okay, well then we're not talking about somebody who's intentionally slighting you. We're talking about somebody where some part of their brain is not able to make that happen. How can we make that happen? How can we set up an environment, use a timer, use reminders, use whatever, so that person is able, so that you guys are able to be on the same team. It's you guys fighting an outside issue. Yeah. It's not the two of you fighting each other.
And I think because you've done a lot of that with me, I've done a lot of that for myself. Mm-hmm. For me to sit here as a grown man with a career to say that I have this timer on my desk and it's changed my life feels a little bit like infantile. But the truth is that there are so many aspects of the way my brain works that are so incredible that the fact that I just need a timer to help me like hit the brakes sometimes is very empowering to me.
Yes. That's a very good point. So... Yeah, exactly. I think that it's important to keep in mind that every single brain has things that it does well and things that it doesn't do well. And for an ADHD brain, the ACC is a part of the brain that essentially applies the brakes. It tends to not function as well or not really function in an ADHD brain. So that's where you get the impulsivity, the difficulty regulating emotions, sometimes saying things you don't mean. And just having awareness around that can bring so much relief. Just to know it's not...
You're not stupid.
Right. You're not mean. You're not insensitive. Like, everybody thinks things that you shouldn't say out loud.
Yeah.
Your brain is just not throwing on the brakes in the same way. So how can we get really, really good at pausing in a conversation or agreeing with your partner about how you'll implement a pause in a conversation to go, let's try again.
Yeah.
Or let's make a good apology. Or let's do something different here.
I think the unfortunate truth is that a lot of us with ADHD still have huge aspects of our lives that require us to participate in activities that are not conducive to our ADHD.
Yeah.
From somebody who has ADHD, my encouragement to you is to bend those things to your will. Like make them suitable for yourself as much as you can.
Yeah.
And constantly remind yourself that your brain just works differently, not worse.
Yep.
Maybe better.
For sure. Yeah, that the issue is not with you. Shame is the belief that, like, there is something fundamentally flawed with us. And it's not that your brain is broken.
Right.
It's not the things that you've been told that are these character flaws. It's that your brain works differently. And when, you stick a fish on land and they're going to struggle. But like when they're back in the water, things are good. It was fine. They can move much better than a land animal, And so knowing that, like, okay, this is me on land right now. This is me not in an environment that suits me well. I'm going to do the best I can to get through because this is required by life. But can I bend this task to my will? Can I change something about it? Can I make it a game? Can I make it a challenge? Can I do something that helps it reach that filter? And if not, can I just be really, really gentle and kind with myself to get through it or get assistance getting through it? And then get back into the environments, get back in the water where I function incredibly well.
Right.
Yeah. And celebrate that.
So if we know somebody who has ADHD or, somebody that we love and care about, or if we have it ourselves or suspect that we have it, and we also live in the state of North Carolina, where could we reach you?
You can find me at ashtreecounselingcenter.com or Ashtree Counseling Center on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn, because it's free.
Thanks, LinkedIn.
No engagement on LinkedIn. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
I'm still going to keep posting that. I don't care.
Whatever.
And we'll also be posting a lot of resources on these topics for folks to go in there, even if you're not local to us or you're not gonna be a suitable therapist for them because they live somewhere else.
Counseling isn't accessible. You're not interested in counseling. Whatever. All of that's totally fine. We'll have some other resources that you can use all on the website.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am so grateful for you and your time today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
And we'll see you next time on I Married Your Therapist. I said, bend it to your will, like the Dark Lord Sauron bending the rings of power to his will. Not the new rings of power Sauron, the original, not the sexy, brooding, conflicted Sauron. I'm talking about the OG, like dark, masked, or helmeted, evil Sauron, like my Sauron,